lässt sie reden und so.
Ja, keine Ahnung.
Aber das verstehe ich.
Ich lese ihn nicht.
Vertrauensperson.
Antaraj Srimad Bhagavatam. Harinam Sankirtan. Lord of Premanand. All glories to the Son. All glories to the Son. All glories to the Son. All glories to Sri Guru and Sri Gauranga. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya.
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 Today we're reading as part of our Scientific Saturday. It's from the Srimad Bhagavatam, Canto 6. And it's from chapter 1, text 31. This chapter is the history of the life of Ajamil. Vikarshato,
Antar,
Hridayat, Dasi, Patim, Ajamil, Yamam, Preshan, Vishnuduta, Varayam, Asur, Ojasa, Vikarshatontar Hridayat, Dasi Jamilam, Yasya Presyan Vishnuduta, Yama Presyan Vishnuduta, Varyam Asur Ojasa, Vikarshatonta Hridayat, Dasi Patim Ajamilam, Yama Presyan Vishnuduta, Varyam Asur Ojasa, Vikarshatonta Hridayat, Dasi Patim Ajamilam, Yama Presyan Vishnuduta, Varyam Asur Ojasa,
Vikarshatontar Hridayat, Dasipatim Ajamilam, Yama Presyan Vishnuduta, Varayam Asurojasa,
Vikarsatontar Hridayat, Dasipatim Ajamilam, Yama Presyan Vishnuduta, Varayam Asurajasa, Vikarsatontar Hridayat, Dasipatim Ajamilam, Yama Presyan Vishnuduta, Varayam Asurojasa,
Vikarshatonta Hridayat, Dasi Patim Ajamilam, Yama Presyan Vishnuduta, Varayam Asur Ojasa,
Vikarshatonta
Vikarshantanta Hridayat Dasipatim Jamilam Yama Preshan Vishnuduta Varayama Surojasa Vikarshantanta Hridayat Dasipatim Jamilam Yama Preshan Vishnuduta Varayama Surojasa Vikarshataha snatching Anta Hridayat from within the heart Dasi Patim the husband of the prostitute Ajamilam Ajamil Yama Preshan the messengers of Yamaraj Vishnuduta the order carriers of Lord Vishnu Varayam Asu forbade Ojasa with resounding voices. Translation: the order carriers of Yamaraj were snatching the soul from the core of the heart of Ajamil, the husband of the prostitute. But with resounding voices, the messengers of Lord Vishnu, the Vishnu Dutas, forbade them to do so. Please repeat. The order carriers of Yamaraj were snatching the soul from the core of the heart of Ajamil, the husband of the prostitute. But with resounding voices, the messengers of Lord Vishnu, the Vishnu Dutas, forbade them to do so. Purport by Srila Prabhupada. A Vaishnav, one who has surrendered to the lotus feet of Lord Vishnu, is always protected by Lord Vishnu's order carriers. Because Ajamil had chanted the holy name of Narayan, the Vishnu Dutas not only immediately arrived on the spot, but also at once ordered the Yamadutas not to touch him. By speaking with resounding voices, the Vishnu Dutas threatened to punish the Yamadutas if they continued trying to snatch Ajamil's soul from his heart. The order carriers of Yamaraj have jurisdiction over all sinful living entities, but the messengers of Lord Vishnu, the Vishnu Dutas, are capable of punishing anyone, including Yamaraj, if he wrongs a Vaishnava. Materialistic scientists do not know where to find the soul within the body with their material instruments. But this verse clearly explains that the soul is within the core of the heart, Hridaya. It is from the heart that the Yamadutas were extracting the soul of Ajamil. Similarly, we learn that the Supersoul, Lord Vishnu, is also situated within the heart. Ishvara Sarvabhutanam Hridesher Dunatishtati, from the Gita. In the Upanishads, it is said that the Supersoul and the individual soul are living in the same tree of the body as two friendly birds. The Supersoul is said to be friendly because the Supreme Personality of Godhead is so kind to the original soul that when the original soul transmigrates from one body to another, the Lord goes with him. Furthermore, according to the desire and karma of the individual soul, the Lord, through the agency of Maya, creates another body for him. The heart of the body is a mechanical arrangement, as the Lord says in Bhagavad Gita 1861, Ishvara Sarvabhutanam Hridesher Natishtati Brahmayan Sarvabhutani Yantra Rudhani Mayaya. The Supreme Lord is situated in everyone's heart, O Arjuna, and is directing the wanderings of all living entities who are seated as on a machine made of the material energy. Jantra means a machine, such as an automobile. The driver of the machine of the body is the individual soul, which is also its director and proprietor. But the supreme proprietor is the Supreme Personality of Godhead, One's body is created through the agency of Maya, karmana daiva netrena. But according to one's activities in this life, another vehicle is created, again under the supervision of Daivi Maya. Daivi hi esha gunamayi mama maya jaratyaya. At the appropriate time, one's next body is immediately chosen, and both the individual soul and the supersoul transfer to that particular bodily machine. This is the process of transmigration. During transmigration from one body to the next, the soul is taken away by the order carriers of Yamaraj and put into a particular type of hellish life, naraka, in order to become accustomed to the condition in which he will live in his next body. Vikarshatom tar hridaya dasi patim majamilam yama preshan vishnaduta varayam asur ojasa. The order carriers of Ajamil were snatching the soul from the core of the heart of Ajamil, the husband of the prostitute. But with resounding voices, the messengers of Lord Vishnu, the Vishnu Dutas, forbade them to do so. Om Jnana Tamarandasya Jnanan Jannasalakaya Chakshur Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha. Hare Krishna. So, although this is Scientific Saturdays, we'll give just a little kind of context to this particular verse. It's at the beginning of the 6th canto, and very interesting that it's positioned here. It comes after some of the descriptions of the 5th canto, and particularly descriptions of the kind of realms that the soul might be taken in order, as Prabhupada says, to prepare it for its next body. Naraka. Often Naraka is translated as the hellish regions. We do that, as Prabhupada did here. But it is not hell in the Christian sense. It is not a place of eternal fire and damnation. It's simply a respite between bodies when the Atma, the soul, gets to experience things very much on the subtle mental platform, which can be nasty, just like in a dream. Dreams can be nasty and frightening, and one may even feel pain within a dream, but it is a dream and it will pass. But still, the descriptions that Shukadeva Goswami gave to Maharaj Parikshit were a little disturbing to him. So knowing that, Shukadeva Goswami is now telling this particular story of Ajamil as a bit of reassurance. And the situation is that we've heard about the life of Ajamil, who had a very good kind of start to his life in terms of a pious upbringing, but kind of went seriously astray and just left aside any kind of thought of spiritual life, even moral behavior, just left it all, and was living, quite a degraded lifestyle. And here he is, reaching his old age, not a thought given to God. But his youngest son, named Narayan, which of course is the name of Krishna, was very dear to him. So in his final moments, fearing he was being lost to this world, he called out Narayan's name. And the Amadutas kind of turned up thinking, well, this is definitely someone we're meant to kind of sort out, pull out of their body because they're so attached to it. We'll kind of sort them out and bring them, get them ready for their next body. But immediately the Vishnu Dutas, the agents of Lord Vishnu, appeared. And they said, nope, you can't do that. So what follows now is quite a discussion between the Yamadutas and the Vishnu Dutas. The Yamadutas think they're perfectly right. This guy is seriously qualified to come with us. And the Vishnu Dutas said, no, you've missed the whole point. That when the soul turns to Krishna, and by chanting the name of Krishna, that wipes out all the other stuff. So you can't take him. Normally you'd be right, but in this case, you're wrong. So he's coming with us. We're sorting him out. And in fact, in this particular case, Ajamil does not die. And he gets to live on and put things right within this one life. I chose this verse and purport because it fits in with the theme that we wanted to present today under Scientific Saturdays, which is evidence for transcendental consciousness. So we're going to have a little chat about some of the aspects of near-death experiences, out-of-body experiences, and so on. So first, to be clear what we've established so far. We went through various philosophical, meditative, contemplative exercises where one can have a clear observation that I am the witness of my thoughts, witness of the actions of my body. I am the observer. I am the subject of my experiences. And we analyze those experiences that they have qualities, that the experiences of our perceptions have qualities which are internal. They may be correlated to the outside world, but the actual things that we experience, what we call our awareness, our consciousness, within that, we're experiencing mental qualities which we call qualia. And these qualia cannot be reduced or explained or accounted for by anything we know within physics, biology, or neuroscience. Therefore, they need to be put in their own little bucket. There is physical stuff, and we know how that works to a fairly large degree. It's not complete, and it doesn't tell us anything about the important stuff of reality, i.e. consciousness and who we are. But in terms of how various objects are constituted and how various technology work, fine. But none of that tells us anything about the actual properties and functions of the mind. So that is a separate category. And even what we know of the mind is different from what we understand of consciousness. Consciousness is that ability to be aware. It is the sentient ability. And the mind is what we are aware of. This is our big difference with Western philosophy of mind, that where they conflate consciousness and mind because they think conscious experience is just mind. But no, there is a conscious observer. There has to be an entity who is the I, who is the observer of the mind. So we have our three little categories of functions and properties. The physical stuff, the mental stuff, and the soul stuff. Now, that's our observations, and we've now created a kind of theoretical framework for how they interact. We've talked about those in some of the kind of Sankhya descriptions of how the different factors of the mind, mana, buddhi, ahankara, and chitta, all work together. Those are the cognitive functions. So we understand how the mind interacts with the body. We understand how the soul interacts with the mind. So that's our theoretical framework. Now, what we're suggesting is that if this framework is correct, this is a perfectly reasonable scientific approach. You've got observations, you develop a theoretical framework to explain it. Then you look at your framework and say, well, what might this predict? And could we test those predictions? Now, Prabhupada is very clear here. The material scientists do not know where to find the soul within the body with their, and you're not going to find it by dissecting the body. Oh, yeah, we've got a hint here. It's in the heart. Let's go chopping up the heart and see where in there there's a little thing that we haven't seen before. And believe it or not, modern medicine is still finding things in the human body that they hadn't seen before. There was one little bone or something that was found recently, or another little organ. It does happen. But no, you're not going to find the soul in that way. But that doesn't mean that there aren't predictions that can be explored through the scientific method. And this gives us a chance for interacting with persons for whom the demonstration by the scientific method is important. For us, the evidence of Shastra is pramana. That's our evidence. That's fine. And the experience that we get through the process of bhakti even reinforces that and gives us not just a belief in the Shastra, but actually realization of the truth of the Shastra. So the best way to provide evidence for transcendental consciousness is in the process of bhakti, through the chanting of Hare Krishna and rendering service to the Supreme Personality of Godhead, through one spiritual master. That is the process. That's the way we will gain evidence. But because Prabhupada asked us through the BI to explore ways in which we can present the science of the Bhagavatam to the outside world, we look at ways in which there is corroborating evidence that can be demonstrated using serious scientific methods. There's plenty of kind of anecdotal evidence that many people quote. And 2 years ago, I took part in this competition arranged by the Bigelow Institute. This guy Bigelow is a big property developer. Then he gets into aerospace. He's doing contracts for NASA and so on. And his wife died, unfortunately, and in his grief, he set up a competition offering a whole range of seriously large prizes for the best proof of life after death. And frankly, what he got mostly was lots of stuff telling him very good ghost stories and very good mediumship stories. Frankly, some of them weren't that good, weren't that impressive, but that's where most people were kind of concentrating on. And he's now giving a further $1 million for research into, making actual connection with souls that have passed on. This is his mission. I entered an essay for the competition, was accepted, but didn't win anything because I took a different line. I took this line that first of all we have to understand what we mean by what we want to survive, and that is we need me to survive. The Christian idea that there is some part of us that survives is intriguing, but which part of it? The part that I want to survive is the me that experiences, isn't it? That's the bit that's important. That's the consciousness bit. And that is not the body, that is not the mind, that is the Atma, the soul. So that's the bit that so I was trying to establish that and then say, we're not postulating something new here, like a soul, whatever that is. We're just saying that there is consciousness, and consciousness is real, and consciousness is who we are. So the question is, can consciousness persist after death? That becomes the question. So that's what we're going to kind of look at, and a few testable predictions. First of all, just to re-establish that consciousness and also the mind are not products of the brain. And that if that's our first step, that consciousness and the material mind are not products of the brain, can they operate independently of the brain? Is there something they could do that is not reliant on the brain? And there's a couple of kind of strands of evidence which are interesting. They're not, the first one is not absolutely conclusive, but it certainly starts to raise the big questions. And that is, do we need a brain? Because there are situations of persons who suffer from hydrocephalus or hydroacephalus. There's two types, which is a kind of water on the brain. One is where the water is on the outside and compresses the brain, less common. More common is when within the ventricles, within the cavities of the brain as it's developing, water is being produced, and it just fills that space and pushes that space out, so that the amount of cortical brain, the real stuff, the grey matter that you need to process things, is tiny. It can be as small as just a little layer on the outside, and therefore it doesn't have all the intricate connections through the center of the brain that we normally have. But they find that when there are such cases, sometimes there is some impairment of learning, some impairment of cognitive function, but the individual is operating pretty happily as a human being. There's one of the best documented ones in the kind of literature is this guy Jacques in France, who worked for the tax office and pretty well found was to have practically no brain there, but worked quite happily in the tax office. And, lived a normal, life with his family. Another very important one recently was a young child called Noah Wall. And again, practically no cortical activity there. In fact, and this was being monitored before he was born. It was kind of clear this was the case. And would he be terminated? Parents didn't want that. But the doctors warned he may not even have the brain capacity to operate his normal functions of breathing and heart. There's that little. But somehow or other, those functioned, and the kid is born, active, chatting, happy, a real conscious being, no question of it. So does this prove that consciousness is transcendental? No, it doesn't. But what it does suggest is that if your idea is that the brain is the thing that's generating consciousness, then explain this one. You're saying that you need a complex, not just a simple one, a complex brain with all its ability to process from here to here and activity in this part of the brain and connecting with that and global workspace, broadcasting and all that. That's not happening in these brains. So this just questions, do we need a brain? Is the brain the generator of mind and consciousness? Now, but in terms of operating in ways that bypass the brain, my favorite way of exploring this in a clinical way is the work that's been done on what's called remote viewing. Remote viewing is the ability of the mind to access information that is distant in time and place. And this is something that some years ago when I was managing Buckland Hall, a friend said, hey, I want to bring in this guy, David Morehouse. He worked for the CIA as a psychic spy. He does these courses on remote viewing. Can we do a course at Buckland? Sure. Can I join in? And so for 5 days we underwent seriously training from morning to night and sometimes through the night on the processes of remote viewing. This was a system devised for the CIA by Stanford Research Institute in the 70s. CIA discovered that other countries had psychic spying and they thought, well, we should have it as well. So they gave this endowment to Stanford, and the guys there, Karg and Puthoff, devised this system. And basically their point was, the viewing is dead easy. That's just natural for the mind. The trick that you need for the CIA is to be able for the viewers to recognize the data that they're getting from the target and to record it in a way that you can use for intelligence purposes. That's the challenge. The viewing is is dead easy. It's automatic. And it is so simple. But we went through learning all the protocols at the CI so that we could document the data that we were receiving and learn to distinguish it from something you might just conjure up in your mind. And then you're able to see, to actually, by that process, it's kind of amazing to open the aperture of the eye from the initial state in the viewing session where everything's kind of just a cloud. It's just like you're in a fog. And then stuff is coming into your mind, little words, little thoughts, little ideas. And sometimes a flash of a little picture. And then, you know, and you're just noting that down. You're just... and I mentioned that in order to do this, one is put into a kind of yoga, relaxed state of where it's kind of the alpha level of brain activity. So chilled, relaxed, but conscious and wide awake. And you're recording all this. And as you're going through the different stages, and the CIA developed 6 stages of this viewing, which would take an hour and a half. By the time you're getting to the end, whatever that target was that was given to you, and I should mention, you're not told anything about the target. You're just given a number. A number that someone has said, this number represents the target. Hare Krishna. Yeah. And just by hearing that number, your mind goes off to that target, even though you don't know what that target is. It's like being given a URL in, you know, on the internet. You tap that in, you may know where this is going to take you, but you're there and you're getting all the information. That's how the mind accesses this stuff. And by the time you finish this session, you feel, I know that target very, very intimately. You may even have seen it well enough to draw it. You may be able to know its time arc from its history, what it was in the past, what it is now, what's going on, you know. And you feel the senses of it. You feel not just vision things, but you may get smells, tastes, and feel the energetics of that place. It's a very interesting process. And working with some of the other devotees on this, we've devised ways in which we can take pretty well a group of anyone, any newcomers, and within a weekend give them enough training and to do a few exercises on this. And then to analyze it quantitatively and to turn this into, to show that statistically these viewers are viewing particular targets. At the end, you know, the verification that is often used by these universities is to match, well, what elements of the target did you see, and were they correct? And that's all right, but I don't think that is as definitive as a simple choice situation. So our system is people are completely blind to the target. But they do the viewing, and then we present 3 options. Which was the one you viewed? And they go A, B, or C. And it's binary. It can be then analysed quantitatively. And doing that, the rate, we get a 55% hit rate on this, which against 33% chance. Now that doesn't seem a huge difference, but when you actually analyse the number of trials that we've done to keep it at 55%, the odds of that are very, very high. It's 1 in thousands and thousands. So it's we're talking with IIT in Monday, and I did a session with them there before the end of last year about trying to kind of take that on a much more rigorous basis. So remote viewing is a very simple way in which we can demonstrate that the mind can access information that didn't come through the brain, that wasn't processed through the senses. So it gives very clear evidence that the mind is able to function separately from the brain. And then the next aspect is, can consciousness function when the brain has flatlined? And that takes us into the world of near-death experiences and out-of-body experiences. Now, a lot is talked about in these things. But first of all, let's give a little rundown of a study that was done by a guy called Dr. Sam Parnia. I think he's Canadian, but did studies involved Britain and Canada in various hospitals. And basically, since the late 60s, when resuscitation of patients with cardiac arrest has improved. Cardiac arrest means the heart has stopped. When the heart stops, there's no blood being pumped through the body. Now, brain cells are different to other cells in the body. Brain cells don't have their own energy source. They require on being fed energy from the blood that is circulating. That's why something like 20% of the blood in your body is going through your head. A huge amount is needed. So if the blood isn't pumping, brain cells shut down within 20-30 seconds. Now, they don't start dying. That was the interesting thing. It used to be thought, well, once they stop, that's it. No, they don't die. They're just not operating. So that's flatline, no electrical activity. And from the materialistic point of view, if there's no electrical activity in the brain, how can there be consciousness? So the question is, are there documented cases of consciousness happening within a patient when we know that their brain has flatlined? That's the point. And that's the bit that we're interested in. And his analysis of people coming out of resuscitation, when they asked them, while you were out there, and completely flatlined, did you experience anything? And some of them said, no, we didn't experience anything. Do you know how much that percentage was? Very small, 4%, yes. And then another 39, big number, had some perception, but they weren't very specific about it. Another 46% had a broad range of recollections. And 9% said they had some kind of what's been called near-death experience, and 2% reported out-of-body experiences. So now, what the usual thing is to say, well, yeah, of course, but coming in and out of consciousness, there will be some delirium, there will be some kind of effect of the mind coming back into play. You're going to generate ideas, thoughts and things. That's when it all is related to. So what you need in these sort of cases is to be able to correlate perceptions that an individual had, which you have the timing of them, and that timing relates to the time that it was flatlined. So there are various kind of stories of that individuals say, well, I was there and I was aware of what was going on in the room, and the doctor came in, he was wearing a pink tie and he knocked over this and he was angry, he was said, and details like that. Or the nurse, could you give me my watch back? I think you took it off me and put it in a drawer somewhere. And these were happening during the period of cardiac arrest. So they weren't something that they could have discovered coming out of it. Now, I remember I was talking with one debate guy and he was saying, oh, is this ATP or something? The brain cells are able to still pick up stuff even when you're, it's flatlined. But what are they being fed through? The senses aren't operating. A person's sight isn't there. Why do you say? That it was just a bogus kind of argument. And one researcher, there's various researchers. Carney has done research. A Dutch neuroscientist, a surgeon. He was a heart surgeon, Pim van Lommel. Very nice guy. Got to meet him at one of Gadadar's conferences on consciousness. He's done probably the biggest study of near-death experiences. And his point is that it happens a lot of times and people just don't talk about it. And he related how he was giving a lecture, and some surgeon stood up and said, "Look, I have lots of patients, and I have never heard any story from any of them about experiences, when during cardiac arrest." And then this lady, also in the audience, jumped up and said, "Look, I'm one of your patients, and you're the last person I would have told about my experiences." So in Wales, we have one lady called Penny Sartori, who was a nurse working with the Morriston Hospital in Swansea. And amazingly, she was given the chance to research about people's kind of end-of-life situations in the ICU, which the intensive care units, and also accident and emergency. And basically, her job then was, we had all these different persons would be, gone through cardiac arrest, they'd be linked to the machines, they'd be monitored, and she was basically running from bed to bed, waiting, for them to wake up and to be resuscitated, and immediately then interviewed them, and she used a very interesting technique to kind of corroborate their perceptions that they were experiencing stuff before they were resuscitated. And it was to ask each of the patients who had been resuscitated what was the procedure that the doctors used. Now we all think we know, isn't it? The paddles, stand back, No, very rarely like that apparently. And those who had said that they hadn't had any perception experiences had no idea whatsoever about how the resuscitation happened. Those who said they had been awake and aware were able to say, yeah, actually they did this and they put a needle in here and someone was fiddling with that and it wasn't, they were having trouble with this and something was... They were able to give the detailed aspects. So that knocks out the idea that this is some kind of delirium coming in after, as one is resuscitated and the brain is now reactivated. This is all prior to that. And other arguments that are used are, well, this is some kind of toxic effect. Either it's too much CO2 in the bloodstream or too little oxygen in the bloodstream, and that will cause delirium. And she was very lucky because they had cases, they were monitoring those aspects and showing that the perceptions are not linked to those factors. So there's a whole bunch of stuff about near-death experiences which is kind of fascinating, and it's worth just mentioning, but it's not necessarily our main interest. Near-death experiences aren't actual death experiences. Parnia is now trying to redefine NDEs, which is a term from the 70s, as REDs, recollection of the experience of death. And I think he's trying to do that because there's more funds available for studying death. But it's not a death experience. It's like Ajamil. It's as pretty close as you can get. You're right on the edge there. But it ain't death. The soul has not left the body permanently, effectively. It is not on its journey to the next thing. And in fact, all the recollections of near-death experiences confirm that. And there's different stages. The first stage in an ND is separation, where you kind of, where am I? What's happened? Am I dead? Am I, don't feel dead, but I don't feel I'm in my body. What's going on? So there's a whole kind of set of emotions and kind of situated with that. And then the next stage is their life review. They're starting to think, well, if this is the end. And then, aspects of their life go in front of them. And the common feeling is, I wasted it. I didn't use life well. In fact, I was mean so many times. I wasn't nice. So there's a lot of regret and remorse in that stage. And then through these different points, they usually kind of meet a being of light. Someone who just seems to exude perfect love and who has their interest in heart. Now, we're not going to jump immediately and just say, well, that sounds like what Prabhupada is describing here as the Paramatma. There are agents for the Paramatma. The Vishnu Dutas are agents for the Paramatma. So it's not necessarily, but they encounter some being of light. And this is what the Yamadutas say. Wow, you guys are so effulgent, who are you? But why are you stopping us? You seem to be so nice and beautiful and wonderful. Why are you trying to kind of interfere with our work? We thought we were doing the pious work, helping Yamaraj. So they meet a being of light who's actually encouraging them. And a phrase that kind of comes up in this one is home again. I've never been here, they think, but it's familiar. I've been through this before. And then they come to a point where they realize, if I go any further, that will be it. I will, be leaving my past behind me. I'll be leaving that life. And a lot of them then are thinking, I'd like to, I don't want to go back. This is so beautiful. So, the serenity, the kind of joy of this particular situation just seems to be so nice. Why would I want to go back? But then something is telling them, no, it's not my time. So they return, and then there's the whole after of coming back into the body. And, for a lot of them, there are very serious transformational effects of this. They've had a life review. They've realized, I shouldn't be behaving like that. There's changes that they want to put into their life. It's, they lose the fear of death. They've been there. They've seen what they think happens. So they just think, well, that's not bad. I would, there's almost a yearning to return to that. And they just become more generous and less selfish, apparently, from the, because Penny Sartori did a lot of follow-up with these persons who reported near-death experiences to see, well, what happens in a year, 2 years, how does it affect them? And it is something which has lasting effect. There is a negative side, and that is that they can't relate to their friends and family, or their friends and family can't relate to them. And, that's something as devotees we often experience, that you're in a different soul space. You know, it's difficult for people to understand what you went through, how that has affected your outlook, your vision of what's important in life, and so on. So, as I say, we don't consider this a death experience, and I actually think that it reveals how the medical fraternity have misunderstood their definition of death, because they're basically using brain death or brain stem death, activity in those areas, as the definition. And that's why you see all these popular newspaper things. Oh, return from the dead. This person was dead for 2 minutes and came back. It's amazing, you know. Human society, so advanced, thinks it's got it all, thinks it understands the universe, understands all of physics, and doesn't even understand what the point of death is. It's pathetic. Nor do they understand the point of birth, or the point when life enters the body. So